Hi guys, welcome to the channel. I hope you're all doing well. This is Perpetuality, and today I've got a video taking a look at some of my favorite white dial watches for 2021. And with me I've got the Style 60 from Seiko on the left and the SPB 213 anniversary watch from Seiko on the right. Now I'll lay out the specifications on the screen for you, but I won't bore you guys with the details. Let's get into the comparison and take a look at both these watches and see how they add up. Now, they both are different. One is a dive watch, the other is more like a sporty dress watch, if that even makes sense. But let's get into it. Let's preface by saying both these watches wear really great. The 213 has a 47.6mm case length, which means for a wrist as small as mine, 6¼ inch in circumference, it actually wears perfectly. I feel like the white dial does expand out the dimensions because it appears a little bit larger, but the black or blue bezel rather kind of keeps it under control. Now mind you, the bezel's thicker on the 213, and on the Style 60, you actually have very similar dimensions at 40.8mm wide and about 47mm in case length, meaning it's a little bit shorter. Wearing on the wrist, it's a little bit nicer. The lugs angle down a lot more. Comfort-wise, I'd say they're about the same. I feel like the bezel on the Style 60, however, is more elegant and actually shrinks down, or I wouldn't say shrink, it actually enlarges the dial. Just a hair bit more than the 213. Both watches wear wonderfully, and you couldn't go wrong with either choice. I won't go into a full in-depth review as I've covered the 213 in my last video. Please check that out if you're keen on checking out more details. However, I feel that in summarizing this watch and its ownership, things I appreciate are the boxed sapphire crystal. It really adds that character to that white opaline dial. Now, the screw-down crown and the drilled lug holes are part of my favorite things to have on this watch to switch out straps. I haven't really gotten to that yet because the bracelet's just so good. And when I mean it's good, I mean that it's comfortable. And the clasp sits centered on my wrist. There's also a solidity to it that I feel more than justifies its price point. I feel like it can go on a more expensive watch. Now, I do understand that some of you do not like the clasp because it feels a little bit flimsy. I feel like it's alright. It could be improved. The watch does have solid end links and the typical Kanagawa wave right there. And the overall solidity of this watch really sells it. The bezel feeling, or the bezel action, it's great, but you have to experience it for yourself in person. I feel like every Seiko bezel varies widely. Now, this bezel doesn't line up perfectly on my example. That's a signature Seiko trait. But I'm happy to say that the action to me is great. The Style 60, on the other hand, it has a fixed bezel. That's right, it's strange, right? Because it looks like it could rotate, but it won't. It's actually a 60-minute indicator, and I think it's wonderful to just tell the time at a glance, useful in daily wear. In fact, the bezel and the actual case is similar to the Seiko crown, the SPB 131 that was released about a year or more. I think it's about 2 years now. I really appreciate the Hardlex crystal and its clarity. I understand sapphire crystal would be a lot more desirable and useful, but for the price point, about the midway point to $1,000, this is an exceptional watch. The angular lugs and the very 60s design in terms of the way that the case angles down towards the wrist is cool. The crown is signed, but it's not a screw down crown, so you have relatively limited water resistance to this. I wouldn't take this diving. For daily use, it's perfectly fine. The knurling is good too. My thoughts on this watch and its finishing is that it's pretty good for the money. I'm happy that it gets a bracelet, And the white dial with that particular bracelet just seems to be a winning combination in my eyes. The clasp could be improved. I feel like it's a little bit on the flimsy side. Only 2 points of micro adjustments. I could go for 4. However, it isn't a bad clasp. It's actually really well finished. There's a chamfer on the inner edge on both sides of the clasp, as you see here. And the overall feeling of how the bracelet flexes on the wrist and how it wears does inspire confidence. The movement inside is your 4R35. You might be disappointed because the Seiko crown previously had got the 6R movement. However, they had to keep this in a, $500, $600 price point, and therefore this movement's perfect for it. Mind you, the specs are nothing spectacular, but it's a workhorse of a movement to have for daily wear. There are more delicate details in the casework. There's a slight chamfer on the edge of the lugs that is a high polished finish. However, the brushed surfaces transition nicely into the polished edge. And from my understanding, Seiko has always done well in this regard. The bracelet, satinated, same with the clasp, and it is signed with the Seiko logo. It does feel like it's good quality to me. The dial is truly where the Style 60 shines, and no kidding, as the indices with that delicate carved edge seem to catch light beautifully on the sunburst white dial. Now, going around that sunburst white dial, there is a bit of a smooth concentric ring. It's hard to make out, but it is there. The overall execution of the date window has been handsomely applied, and there is a lume indicator going around those indices. Those tiny rectangles right there you see are the lume pips or plots. The printing is sharp, I can't complain. Made in Japan, Presage, automatic, all done excellently, as usually for Seiko. I do feel that for the Style 60, it could have differentiated itself a little bit more from the Seiko crown, but I have a feeling that Seiko liked the design enough to want to bring it down to a more affordable price point for people and make it more accessible, which I've got no complaints for. It's a wonderful dial, wonderful watch. The 213, on the other hand, I've covered extensively in my last video, and there are more macro shots there, but the execution of this white dial, it's more silver opaline than it is white. It has a duality to it. The indices are all stamped, as are for most Seiko watches of this price point. The blue hand that you see there, the seconds hand, it's painted and not heat treated. I couldn't find any more info on it. Printing, as per the usual, is no different from the Style 60 in quality. I do feel that the sunburst effect is more prevalent on the 213 than the Style 60, however. The hands are actually high polished underneath and brushed on top for visual impact, and I love that part. I think both of these watches are wonderful white dial options. If you're looking for one in an affordable price point, these might tick the box for you. Now, the only thing I'd have to say is that the Style 60 kind of feels like Seiko reached within the leftover inventory of parts for the Seiko crown and decided to make a watch out of it. And that's not a bad idea because it's a great looking watch, but I feel like they should have done a little bit more to differentiate the watch other than giving it a down-rated movement and still not giving it a sapphire crystal. For the fact of the lume, I feel that the lume on the Style 60 is not that strong. It is usable, useful enough. The hands are fairly good in terms of differentiating from the hour and minutes. My only gripe with them is that the lume pips for the hours are far too small. That could be improved. The 213, on the other hand, lights up like a torch, and it makes sense because there's more lume material on the dial itself, as this is a dive watch and the Style 60s is more of a daily wearer. So given that circumstance, the Seiko Lume Bright has been handsomely applied and is very effective on the 213. If you liked today's video, please like it, share, and consider clicking on the alert notification to be notified of new videos. and please subscribe as it helps me make more videos. Thank you, I'll catch you in the next one.